Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ask R&D session. This is part 2 of the NaturalONE and DevOps session that was held July 17th. Today, we have a number of presenters, many that you're already familiar with, Zvonimir Ivanichich, Ellie Cohen, and I hope that you will enjoy today's session. I'd like to go over a few housekeeping tasks first. First, this will be a recorded webinar. We ask that you please keep yourself on mute and turn off your camera until the Q&A session when you're welcome to ask questions live. You can also put your questions throughout the seminar in the chat function. All slides and recordings that we're doing today will be provided after the webinar, and any unanswered questions that we don't get to at the very end will also be followed up. So with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Ellie and let you guys begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. So thank you everybody for joining for this part 2. Actually, we wanted to do it last time, but Zvonimir didn't have time to finish his 2 other topics, which we thought it is important, and we just initiated immediately to have this session. Next slide, Zvonimir. So as a reminder for everybody, all our resources are starting from this website, developer.softwareag.com. All the links, all the materials that you need to learn and to know Adabas and Natural are there. As Nicole mentioned, this is a recorded session and it also will be available into the group platform. So with that, I will pass over to Zvonimir. So please write your question in the chat. We will collect them and we'll have time for the questions and answer. The floor is yours, Zvonimir.
Okay, so hello everybody. Let me welcome you again to our second part of the presentation. I was really happy to see the huge interest that we had in the last session, and we didn't came through the contents, and we have immediately set up a second session for you full of content, and I will also guide you through the topics of today where we will look into. I will do a short recap on the server mode versus repository-based development, but I will not do a live demo on this one. I would kindly request everybody who have not participated in the first session to watch the recording so that you can see all the content that was presented there. And today I want to focus on the 2 chapters mainly afterwards that I could not present the last time due to a lot of questions. And this is about the helpful tools and tips where I have collected some topics and slides. And I also want to show you this in a live environment, and so that it simply gets more clearer to everybody what the advantages of these especially tips for your daily work are. And I will also go into the guidance on version control this time, where I have a few slides to show you how to step into the operational part and how to set up branching in the first step as an initialization for your repository-based development and release management. But of course, yeah, the session is called Ask R&D. Also this time, I hope to have at least half of the session reserved for questions. So at the end, we will this time do the Q&A session. I will not interrupt as I would like to go through, and I expect the content to take around about 35 minutes that I will now present to you. And then we can switch to the Ask session for the Q&A session and then look into all the questions. Good. So with that, let me quickly recap on the server mode versus repository-based development that we saw the last time. I just picked one slide to once again reiterate on this approach. We will not go into much detail, but you should be aware of the repository-based approach and how it works. Yeah, as you see it here on the slides, we have the developer workstation in this case with NaturalONE that is connected through a natural development server connectivity remotely, and in this case can work in a remote server mode against the development environment where your natural runs and where the sources are located in the F user. And in this approach of the server mode, you can also operate in parallel with a green screen editor, as we see it here. And the change, as I mentioned also the last time in the mindset when you move to the repository-based development, is that you introduce a source code management system like a Git repository server, which then becomes your single source of truth, where all your sources of your application that you are embarking on this approach will then reside as the single source of truth. And in the way to work as a developer, you are usually pulling the changes not from the F user anymore on your backend server, on the development environment, on the mainframe, but you pull it from the repository server, working with a local Git repository that we could see in the last session, also where it is located. And with this local Git repository, you are making your changes inside of your local workspace and then commit it to the repository. And when you are finished with your work, you can push them back to the repository, but before you're pushing them back, you can also test them, as we could see the last time, especially with the private mode libraries, which are a very strong tool that allow you to upload and test changes in isolation to other developers, as this automatic created private mode libraries for your individual libraries for each user working with NaturalOne are handled automatically, so that you do not upload your changes to the shared library in this approach, can still test on a central environment if you cannot parallelize it in a different way. And then afterwards, when you're finished, when you're happy with the execution, as we can see, you can push it to the central repository. And this then triggers automatically a continuous integration process based on our automatically generated ARN scripts. And this job, for instance, running in a CI tool like Jenkins, is then automatically uploading your changes into the F user, the shared development environment. And the repository is the location where you can then also merge changes in case they are happening. And with this approach, you have the ability, as mentioned the last time, to have not just a repository where all the changes are historized, but also the ability to work in parallel with different teams on different branches and different functionality, which gives you more agility in your approach. So with this small recap on the repository-based approach, I again want to point you to the previous session if you are interested to see this also in the last demo. But this time we will concentrate on the helpful tools and tips for your daily work, which I have prepared, which were missing in the last session. And I want to give you all this content as well from this part, so that this probably triggers also some additional questions afterwards in our Q&A session. So, good. First of all, I will start with some specific tools. I will not today explain them more in details, but just give some sentences to these tools. But all of them should at least ring a bell, or you should know what it is about. If this is not the case, then I would simply recommend that you then look afterwards what these tools are and if they can help you if you're in your daily business. And here I would, of course, start with the repository integration that we have looked into. I think this is absolute strength of modern software development, and you get it out of the box, as we could see in the last session. Then the debugging capabilities of NaturalONE that allows you to debug through the application, as we could also see in part 1 in a quick ad hoc demo where I was debugging through an application to see the values. Then we have the Data Explorer that you should actually look into if you are not familiar with, which is a strength tool, a strong tool, which allows you as a developer to quickly look into data in Adabas and see changes that you have potentially done. I think quite helpful for quick look into Adabas data or even SQL data based on the DDMs. The cross-references capability, where I will also show a little bit in the tools and tips today, which are strong in NaturalONE. Then the code profiler. In case you haven't used the code profiler, you should also look into it, as it gives you benefits to analyze the execution times of your application. And this can really help you to find out bottlenecks or a lot of loops inside of your processing. The private mode that we could look also into part 1, which is a strong capability to isolate yourself to a certain extent so that you can upload and make changes while still sharing the same development environment on the ZOS, for instance, with your developers. Then we have unit testing capabilities also as part of NaturalONE. They are mainly based on RPC communication of subprograms, but it's a strong capability where you should also look into if this can help you in your daily work. And additionally to this, we have additional plugins, 2 ones that I want to mention, which are also belonging to an additional product, which many of our customers and you probably have. And there's also a specific plugin in NaturalONE that you can use. One of those is Predict. If you are using Predict, you should definitely look into the Predict plugin, which is part of NaturalONE. And the second is about Construct. If you are using Construct and the models to generate your sources, you should definitely look into the plugin in NaturalONE and if it can help you on the daily basis. And this applies to all these bullet points. If you know the topic and you say, I know it, we don't need it, that's fine. But if you don't know what it is about, I would kindly request you afterwards to have also a look into this. Good. So with that, let us move to my tips and tips that I have prepared today for you, that I will also show in a live demo environment again, because then you can better memorize it and leverage the value. So the first one that I want to point out is about the importing of data fields. I think a very strong capability wherever you have data definitions, and they are of course heavily used in Natural, you can just reuse them and import them from any object type. And this is very helpful to never retype your data definitions if you have them anywhere in a program, subprogram, or a data structure or data area. We will see this afterwards in my demo as one example. The next hint is about the line error number. So usually there can be a difference between the mainframe line number and the line number that you see inside of NaturalONE. And here we have a nice capability with Control G to exactly match this line number. And I will also show you an example later on in my demo. So for those who try to correlate and match this, I think this is an important tip that you should be aware of. The next topic is about the uppercase translation. Usually, there's the practice that sources, especially on the mainframe, are used in uppercase. And here typing in Natural, it can really be an enhancement if you don't have to do this yourself. And if you have not already discovered this capability, I will also show it today as a preference that you can automatically enable uppercase translation. Then there is a console output. The console output is also very helpful to enable because it shows you what happens behind the scenes when you are working with a local or server mode and when changes are uploaded or cataloged. So this I will also present, and if you're not using it, you should definitely then take a look into it. And especially this can be nicely combined with an automatic project build, because if you are working especially in a local or repository-based approach, you probably know these two icons here to upload changes or build the project, but in fact you don't have to use them. You can just activate to build the projects automatically, and then they become obsolete, and this really saves you time to click on this button on a daily basis. The next topic is about searching in NaturalONE. And here we have different capabilities on different levels that I will also quickly show in my demos. And the first one is the standard search on the editor space in the middle, where you can just search or even replace values easily in what is shown in the current editor area. But we also have a strong search capabilities on the file level, which comes out of Eclipse and is very helpful if you want to search for content or files inside of your projects. And this capability is, as of today, only available if you are working with your sources in projects in the local workspace. But if you move them into the local workspace, this is a very strong search capability. The last session, part 1, Eli already spoiled that we are working, in fact, even for such capabilities for the next release on the server mode. But as of today in the versions, this capability is only available if you have the projects locally, and then you can do a search and get a nice tree that shows you the content and all the files in this tree structure where you can find them. And I think one very important and helpful feature for those who don't know it is if you have a lot of sources, 10,000 modules, and you don't want to open all of them in your local view, you can easily search by a pattern for each resource. And this is achieved by Control-Shift-R, and then you can just type some letters of your module, and then it will be found in the search, and you can directly open it. And it's very comfortable to combine this with this link with editor functionality, which keeps your editor in sync with the projects. And then I have 3 additional topics to mention, and we will see all them quickly in my live demo afterwards. The first one is that it's not just the server mode and the repository-based approach, but you can in general, out of the server view, add projects to your local workspace. Probably you have already discovered this, and this gives you the strength that you can, even without a repository, just move all the resources into your local workspace out of a library. You have probably tried this out. And when you do so, the library is added to a project in your workspace, and this gives you the strength that you immediately have all the sources, you're working locally, you can make all these changes, and also from a search perspective have full access to your modules. But this also can be a little critical, so to speak, if you are still working in the F user, and especially if there are changes done by multiple users even remotely. And therefore, one option that I want to highlight in this setup is very important to make this work. And this is to check the server timestamp when you are working. And this is also a property preference that you can set inside of Natural, and it ensures that you are not overwriting changes, but rather can afterwards compare them and ensure that the right mixed version is in the server side. And last but not least, there's also the ability to read missing objects from the server. Also want to point this out, and we will see this in the demo. And this allows you that if there are references not directly resolvable by the object which is open, especially in the view, that you can at least let NaturalONE read and retrieve some of the objects, and they are then displayed in the dependency view. And with this, we will now look into these capabilities. They're also about the dependencies that we will see in my live demo part that I'm now presenting to you. And probably I'm a little bit fast in this session, but I try to bring through all the content. And if this is the case, the good thing is you will have a recording afterwards to show that. And you can always look into a topic that you are interested in. It also might be that many of these topics are known to the majority. So therefore, let us now go into the live presentation part. So with this, I will quickly switch off my video so that you can concentrate on what I'm showing and the content. And now I will start with with my live demo. So first of all, we are back to NaturalONE. And in the NaturalONE environment where we stopped the last time, you remember we have the Project Explorer. This is still my project that I have sourced and versioned in Subversion. But today we will look into the server mode again and the capabilities and all these hints that I have mentioned. And I guide you through this step by step. So first I want to start with the server mode here against my mainframe where we have the libraries, and I'm also working in my example again today with a mainframe because this is simply for all the customers having still a ZOS environment very supportive, I think, to identify yourself with this environment. And I'm using the NSPF again. This time I will concentrate on the anti-cruise library for these examples, and we will look into the programs. And here you can see the programs that I will, in this case, work on, and the same programs you see in the logical view of the server view also represented in this environment. And the first hint that I would like to show you in this case is about reading of the dependencies in the server view. So you can see here on the right hand side this dependency tree, and as you can see, there are some modules here displayed and some are not visible. They are just mentioned here as unknown, as this is not resolved from a dependency point of view after I have opened this in the server view. And we also have the project here immediately opened up in this area. You can see it when I open it in the server view, this temporary project is created, as I have mentioned. And here I want to show the first preference here in the option, and this you can find where all the natural preferences are located in the project tab. And here you can, for instance, say that you want to read missing objects from server. And in this case, if you activate this option and save this module here, you can immediately see that this jumps and identifies at least some of the additional modules like the data structures, but also the maps. Subprograms, and this is why this stays unknown, are not analyzed in this approach and they are not read, but we will see how subprograms are then added and automatically seen when you bring this to the local mode. But what you can do, you can always click here on this dependency, and then it additionally loads the subprogram into your temporary space. And if you're in the subprogram, the dependencies are then again shown. And what is very interesting here is this link with editor. Whenever you switch here between these objects, you can also see that he navigates you to the right object here in the Project Explorer. So with this, I will close the modules open, and you see when they're all gone, your temporary project is disappearing on the server side. And now I want to show you the ability of adding a project to your local environment. You probably know this. This, in fact, is even the first step to do an initial load of the repository. But you can just take every library, if you have the permissions, of course, to do so from security point of view, and add it into your local workspace and give it a specific name. And if you do so, it transfers your modules into your local workspace. And when you are transferring them into the local workspace, this gives you the advantages that you have access to all your programs, all your modules, and also from a cross-reference point of view, if we would look here again into, you now immediately see all the references available. And this allows you to simply work more efficient with this application. So what I want to show you in this case is not just how to edit, because you probably know it, but I want to show you the strength of the checking that you should also use, the checking of the server timestamp when you are working in this approach. Yeah, so if I'm making here, for example, a change, I can here do a change. In this application, you see these decorators, and if I'm now uploading these changes to the server with this button over here, we get the changes then here displayed. So let us look into the environment here on the mainframe and browse this module, and you can see the changes are here, yeah, on the F user that I have on my environment. And if I would in this case now edit this module, yeah, and we add something here on the ZOS side, yeah, then install this, then these changes are applied to this module, of course. Yeah, but if I'm now making here a change on the environment of the local project, and this often can cause confusion, so I make here a change and call this 1, and just work without the server timestamp. This has the risk that I now just uploading this module to the server and not being notified that there's a different version on the server. And this is in fact something which can cause to an unliked situation, so to speak, and it really can make that you cannot work properly, because if you now look here, you have directly the changes inside of 1. And to work in this approach with a local project together with the F user sources, in this case, you should activate the server timestamp check. This is this option here under Natural Builder, where you are checking for the server timestamp. And this should definitely be activated, because what now happens if you are here in the edit mode and you say this is a change on ZOS change 2, and I'm storing this change here, and now I'm making again a one change, save this module, get the decorator and want to upload the changes, I am now notified. And I'm now notified that there is a conflict with the sources. And this is very good because this will avoid that I'm overwriting. And usually in this case, you should say no to all. Because if you're not aware what is on the server, you should not overwrite it in general if you are not sure. And then you have a real strong capability. You see this decorator. You also see it, by the way, here, all the modules where the timestamp is not fitting because there was a change on the server side. And then what you can do is always compare with the base library, for instance, from the context menu. And this is a really strong capability because here you can see what was the change that was done on the mainframe, what was my change. And in this case, you can just decide to do a mixed change out of this. Yeah, just write mix. And when you save this right now, you can now upload the changes to the server and you have compared what is the difference. And this is what then is also reflected on the server side. So you can see I have now mixed two. And this is an approach how you can even with the F user work with shared libraries, libraries with projects in your local workspace combined with this option. This is what I wanted to show as one strong capability. Then you have also recognized that I have to use these upload functionalities here to the server whenever I make a change. So whenever I get in here and say again 1, 3, you have these decorators. And this causes you either to use this or that button. But this can be optimized, and it can be optimized with two options that help you, first of all, to avoid this button, and the second is to see what happens. So let us first start with the console output that I have mentioned. If you set the console output and now do an upload of this module, you can always track what happens exactly behind the scene in communication with the NDV server of your server-side environment. So you can see how I'm here connected to the mainframe environment, to the NDV, and that this program is stored. And this is very helpful because you can track exactly what happens behind the scene, and you can combine this then very nicely with the ability to build natural projects automatically. And if you click on this, you can now, whenever I make a change, this means wherever I'm in a program and make here a change to 4 and save, in this case I do it with Control S directly, you see here no decorators anymore. I don't need to use this button and it's immediately updated. So as soon as I go here to the server, look again into the product, you see the module, you can see that my latest change is available on the backend environment. So this can really nicely be used, and it can also be combined, because if I'm again here making a change on this environment and store the program, and you're now automatically making here a change like 1.6 and I'm saving it, then you can see that I'm getting the errors. They are here in the log, and I'm also informed about this by this notifier. So it's not automatically then overwritten in case somebody did something on the F user. I am automatically notified, and I can also here in this case set compare with base library. And if I do so, I see the changes on the mainframe, can directly decide how it should look like and say this is the mixed 8 change. And with this, when I'm saving it, it's fine. And as soon as I now save, after I did the correction here, you see it's now uploaded because I have confirmed that this is the right version. So very comfortable to work. And I just wanted to share these capabilities with you. So the other topic is to switch now to the other topics about the line numbers. So with the line numbers, I think this is also easy to demonstrate. If you would look at exactly this program and go a little bit down here, the road to some messages, for example, here, and you can see there is an error message somewhere here at the bottom, and it has line number 920. So you can always with Control G see what is your current line number, and if you type in the line number that you see on the server, it brings you exactly to the line number in your program. So with this you can easily switch in both sides and ensure that you have the right line number in place. The next hint is about the uppercase translation. So for instance, if I would here just write message in small case, the backend environment is even set in a case that it gives me an error because it's case sensitive in this case. And this can also be for you eased if you are just setting the case translation as active. And to easily find this configuration, you can sometimes search for the preferences here in this small field. And when you do so, it just shows you here preferences where the item starts with this name. And with this, you can easily activate case translation, also exclude comments and quotes, and just apply the settings over here. And if you do so and now make a change to your module and save, it is immediately uppercase before it's transferred to the server. And in this case, your sources are then uploaded as well automatically. So with this, I would go to the two last topics that I want to share from the tips and tricks. The first one is about the searching capability. So first of all, as I mentioned, with Control F, you can easily search for value like sorry in the document. And this is the standard search and replace, which only has effect on this editor area here. I think everybody knows it. It's easy to find. What is more strong is the search capabilities on the file level. If you don't know it, this is something which is only available if the projects are in your local space or you're working with a repository. With Control H, you can start them. And here you have really strong capabilities to search for containing text or file patterns of names. And here I can, for example, search for sorry. And if I do so, I get here an additional view with all the results in a tree. And whenever a view is small, you can just double click on the tab and then it increases to the maximum and you can see it in full size. When you double click again, it returns back. And here I can, for instance, see that I have multiple two programs matched with multiple positions. And if I open such a field and click, you can see that, for instance, in this program, I also have this sorry text that I was using. And additionally to this, the strong search capabilities that I want to highlight, there is the ability to also find a module or resource, how it's called in Eclipse, just based on the names that you are typing. And this is done with Control-Shift-R, probably not everybody knows. And here I can just start, if I know the program starts with something like NCM, and then I could say, oh, there's the program. And it immediately shows you all the programs in your local workspace. This is the menu. Or if I know it's like NCIN, and then here you can see the NCIN map that I have used. And when I click on it, I'm directly in this program. And this is really nice to be combined with the ability to sync here with the editor, as this object is then also always opened in the editor. So with this, we come to the last tip that I want to share in today's session. And this is the ability, as I mentioned, as the first point, to import data fields. So whenever you have a data structure somewhere in any of your programs, like here in the NC menu, and you want to add something here, and the definition exists anywhere. You don't have to type it again or copy it from somewhere. The best way is to go through the context menu and say import data fields. And here you can select the project and the library, the object type, for instance, a subprogram that you have, and then you can browse for the subprograms in your library. For instance, I choose this one. It's one that retrieves data. And when you do so, you get all the data definitions here displayed, which are in this object, and you can just select one of those. And if you select even here to use all the child fields, it will include all the fields below this entry. And this can really ease your life, as you can always copy from data structures, from subprograms, fields, and import them into your application. And I think this is a strong capability. If you were not aware of it, just to let you know about this. Okay, so I have shown a lot. I have talked also fast. Probably it was too fast for some of you. As said, there will be a recording available. If a specific topic is interesting, please then watch the recording. or just ask questions also afterwards. You will have some time to demonstrate these topics as well. And additional to this, I'm now switching back to my presentation. As you might know, there's even still content to be shown. So with this, I'm now moving back to my presentation and would also like to take at least 7 additional minutes to share the content about the version control and deployments, as I think this is also very helpful for some of you, especially if you have not yet embarked to move to a repository-based development. And therefore, I would like to explain a little bit how the differences are between the dev and the ops part and how you can set up an initial version with your branching. And then afterwards, we will move to the question and answer session. So we have already looked into the approach that we see right now on the slides. So this is about the repository-based development, how I called it. It is the way to bring the sources into the repository, a continuous integration process that automatically deploys it to the server. And you can be fine to just start with exactly this when you are embarking on the DevOps part. I call this the dev of DevOps. But of course, there's also more. You can think about how to bring your changes also to an QA environment or to a productional environment where you have your sources. And in the beginning, the majority of our customers have in fact existing deployment tools already in place, which are well established, and you do not have to touch them. You can combine them with the repository-based approach until dev, and just use your existing deployment tools to move your changes that you have done on dev instead of directly on the F user. You can just move them afterwards to a QA or the prod environment with your tools. Nevertheless, you can leverage also the scripts and the assets in there to feed these tools with the asset name lists that you have changed in a repository, so that this can be also used as input for your existing deployment tool to enhance this. So this is what you can of course do, so that in the first step, you are not necessarily forced to move to a release management based on branches, as we will see on the upcoming slide. Because this approach also gives you already the strengths with a repository to work in parallel, to make branches or features which are implemented in parallel. You can execute them either with the private mode or with separated F user for your developer. And if you set it up properly, even in this approach, you can use branches, deploy them to a QA environment, and use them in a QA environment, either in a private mode or in a separated F user. So to test them in a QA environment before you then branch them to production. So this even works in such a setup. But the full-blown way is to set up a complete branching for the environments based on a source code repository system. And here I want to quickly show you something about an additional setup of your repository in a DevOps environment and how you can get this starting. So first of all, you have the different environments as we see it here. And the dev environment and the QA usually has an NDV server, while a productional server might have one or not, depending on how your strategy is to put an NDV server on production. Then you have a developer workstation where you can start as an initial step. You need a repository server and of course a CI/CD server like Jenkins. And what I'm showing now is just the initial setup. This is not what all developers are doing on a daily basis, but just an administrator the first time when you want to bring this into the repository. And the first thing that you could do, in case you don't have an NDV in your productional system, you should transfer the F user from production to a QA server where you have an NDV server, because the branching, as my recommendation, is to start with the sources that you have in production. They are the real sources in production, and you should add all the other library changes on top on this version. And with the version from production, you can create your first initial branch, the production branch, that you are then committing to the repository. And then afterwards, you load the changes from the QA environment through adding to your project, and Git will show you all the differences. And all the differences that you have on the QA environment, you can easily identify with this approach, and afterwards create your QA branch based on these differences that you really want to get in, or just get rid of all these differences. And as the final step, you should use your development environment and then load the changes from there on top of your project and create the development branch out of this, with seeing all the changes that might be different on development, and then figure out what you really need to commit into your development branch. And with this, you have set up your initial environments, and after having the branches, you should also set up the right deployment for these branches, which means whenever there is a change done to the development environment, you should have the Git repository then automatically pushing this to a CI/CD server or triggering it to build the version and upload it to your dev environment. The same applies to the QA branch. Whatever you bring into the QA branch, you would then automatically upload and build this on your QA environment. And of course, finally, what you bring into the production branch should then be transferred and deployed to the production server. By intention, I have here written deploy, because you don't need to build something on production. You just need to establish a way how you bring the changes then from this version into production. But the build can happen either on the QA or even on the dev server, depending on your environment, but you need to ensure then to deploy and transfer them to production in a scheduled way. In case you have an NDV server which is secured, you can also think about approaches with a parallel F user, which is not the one in production, and then use an approach with this main or this OBJH to transfer it actively into the running production. But I will not elaborate on this in details. There will probably be sessions in the future about this approach where we will have a lot of chances to exchange how this is done as best practices, because this really would to be too much for this session today. So before we come to the long question and answer session, I just want to summarize the key takeaways from the content that I like to present. I want you to consider the server mode development just as an entry point or a short-term solution. Think about the local mode as something in between that I have showed today with the server timestamp, or embarking on the journey about the repository-based development. Also, please make yourself familiar with helpful tools and tips that I have mentioned today. Some you might know, others might really be helpful, so look into them. And finally, use version control systems and branching so that you can really achieve working in parallel, agility, and then also a modern automatic deployment of your changes. With this, I'm through with the content of today. I hope this was interesting, comprehensive, and now let's join all the QA sessions, questions, and see how far we can get. With this, I will pass over to you, Eli, and guide us as a moderator, please, to the questions.
Yeah, so thank you, Svonimir, for this presentation. So first question, can Tekton be used instead of Jenkins as a CI/CD pipeline?
What is the name? Tekton?
Tekton.
Yeah, I must say I have not heard about it. In general, I see no obstacle in any tool. The only requirement is that the tool can connect to a Git repository on one hand side, and that it can execute an ARM deployment script on the other side. Then in general, you are already able to use this tool.
There is an additional question regarding Jenkins with automated tested. Someone asked if it will be touched here in this presentation. So they are interested in repeatable automated unit tests via Jenkins.
Yeah, so as you have seen, it's not touched in this presentation. I also cannot demonstrate it, but in general, the unit tests which you can use in NaturalONE, which are based on RPC communication for subprograms, you can also include into your DevOps pipeline, and they can also be triggered remotely and then executed in a way of continuous testing, so that you can ensure that testing happens whenever you commit a change to your development environment, for instance. This can be set up. Yeah, there is, I think, even in a YouTube video, a short session on this. Yeah, maybe also to mention at this point, we have for specific parts here also YouTube videos which are still available, which show different pieces. And in one of them, the unit testing is included as a short glimpse. And additional to this, yeah, you need to look then probably into the documentation or see where you can get additional material, how to get yourself up ramped. But I cannot cover this in today's session.
Okay, next one. Will the Data Explorer also be able to connect to IBM's DB2?
Yeah, to my understanding, this is possible. If you have a DB2, you have a DDM defined inside of NaturalOne, you should be able to access the data in DB2. Maybe this is also a question to Regina, the expert in the session. Maybe she is familiar with this capability and could quickly jump in.
I'm not really an expert regarding the Data Explorer, but I think it should be possible because you can define a DDM for DB2 database, and so it should also be possible to use it in the Data Explorer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Regina. Sometimes the temp project are not removed when all object in the editor is closed. Why? And what is the best way of cleaning this up?
Okay, so first of all, this should not happen. If you have such a case, I would recommend that you open a support ticket, because this means there is still something open. We have with recent fixes, in fact, again, found some still defects here. For example, there was something related to resource files, that when the resource files were in the project opened, that in this case, the resource files were not removed. But here I would just kindly request to install the latest fix, as this was also removed. In case you still have such a situation, it would be anyway really interesting to create a ticket for us so that we can look into it to make sure that this doesn't occur. If it occurs, it's not a big deal. At the end, the temporary project, as you remember from the first part, is just something in your local workspace. And if you really think there's a project still open but no modules inside, you can also just delete this temporary project and then it's gone. So it's not a big deal to delete an empty temporary project which for accident was not properly removed, but it shouldn't happen.
Right. Now, it's two questions. Is the debugger works in share mode same as in private mode?
Yeah, so the debugger, of course, works as well with the private mode. Otherwise, yeah, this would not be very helpful. Also, the debugger is able to look into the private mode libraries when stepping through your processing, which then debugs your individual isolated library, which is put up front, so to speak.
Next one, when DDM generated while working in private mode will not be saved and compiled on the server and act same as other natural models. I think we had a AHA request for that.
Yeah, is this an extension then to the question? Let me try to understand it.
Cheze, can you open the mic and try maybe to emphasize? He's still here. Let's see.
Yeah. So
no.
Probably this is then a special question which is related to DDMs. Yeah. So in general, if your DDMs are also stored together with your library, then the DDMs are also part of your private mode library. But it could in fact be the case that DDMs stored centrally in the FDDM could have a different behavior. But in this case, you're anyway uploading them and they are finding its way to the shared library. So you should also debug them properly. But it might be a topic to look into. I don't know, Regina, can you add something to this from your expertise?
No, I don't know if the DDM is saved in the private mode library. Of course, if it's in the library, stored in the library, but if it's on FDDM, I think it's not stored in the library, but I have to check this, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think we have also a request for that Chezi created. I think he created that, and we will get back to you, Chezi, on this one. Okay. Next question. Also from Chezi. Is there a difference between a module create under shared mode versus private mode, especially on line number and code page?
No, that shouldn't be a case. Yeah, that's the same module uploaded in the same way. It's just that it doesn't find its way to the shared library, but is then put in the managed private mode library for the individual user. But it should be exactly the same. Because at the end, the goal is that when you commit the changes to a repository, it's brought into the shared library. And then afterwards, you can consolidate your private mode libraries and actually remove all the modules that you have in your private mode libraries which were equal to those in the shared library, as they have no value anymore afterwards. Yeah.
Okay. Next, it's more about an issue where the Eclipse IDE is freezing and he needs to restart, reopen. And the question is there a future fix for that?
Yeah. So, of course, the IDE should not freeze. I'm also aware that sometimes when you work intensively with a lot of projects and open a lot of modules, at sometimes it can occur. Yeah, we are behind all these defects. It's a defect of environment, of course, and I think we have fixed quite some along the way. Even in the last year, there was something that we could find out. This will continuously improve. Here it's similar as the not disappearing temp project. I would kindly request if you can somehow reproduce this behavior, because this is the most challenging part for us. If this can somehow be reproduced, and I know that's not easy because it just occurs occasionally, then we could find it. But otherwise, from an R&D point of view, it's really hard to chase something which is just sporadically occurring. But whenever we discover such a situation, especially in these TCP/IP remote communications, we are fixing it, but we need sometimes information, trace information, so that we can reproduce and ensure that we get rid of all the possibly still included defects.
Okay. Additional comment is there someone using code coverage plugin in Jenkins, and what is the best to configure it? I mean, it's a question to all the audience here, but the code coverage plugin is could be used with Jenkins, so we just need to find who is using it and refer it to you, Chezi. Would you like to add a comment, Vladimir, on this?
Yeah, I'm not sure on this one. I think this is in fact possible, that you can use it and then you can include in your continuous testing pipeline also the code coverage information, because there is the code coverage capabilities when you are running through, and it creates a report, and based on this to my knowledge can be included, but I do not have sufficient practice to answer this right now. This would then probably require a follow-up to look into that code coverage capabilities. Yeah.
Okay, next question is from Douglas. What is the recommendation of doing the build? Cherry picking object and deploying them to the target, or doing a full deployment of the repository? what suggests repository structure, one per library, all library in one repository, or some subset of library in multiple repositories?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can answer on this question, especially as it is a complex one in this session. What is the best strategy on the versioning? Yeah, I think cherry picking should not be used on a daily basis. You should actually try to set it up in a way and where you in your branching strategy can create feature branches or defect branches for your individual changes, and then you can apply these branches and merge them to the individual environments. I also have slides on this where we have successful implementation on customer, but I think it would go too far for this session if we look into branching and best practices, how this is done, especially for those who are not even on a repository-based approach yet. This goes too far. Nevertheless, I also see this need, and this could bring us to probably a future session that we could set up for those who are especially interested in branching and how this works. And here maybe even with a customer case where it's not just on a theoretical basis, but where we have a customer example, how this really works properly. And I would probably recommend to postpone this to such a session where we could share it with everybody who is interested, as I will not be able to answer this quickly in this session.
Okay. Next one. It's a use case where someone modify natural module and do some testing from inside NaturalONE in my private mode library. Then I push to the remote repository. Afterwards, someone else modify the same object and pushes. Then again, I do some testing from inside NaturalONE in my private mode library, but my private mode library does not know the current version on the NDV server. That means that I'm testing with an outdated module version in my PM library, private mode library. Where is my error in reasoning? Did you understand the scenario?
Yeah, I think I understood it. It's probably a tricky one. I think what would help in this case is, in fact, that after you push, I would say, multiple changes to your repository, afterwards you should consolidate your private mode library. In this case, there's an ability to consolidate the private mode library, and in this case, all the changes that you have in your private mode library, or not changes, because they are same as the shared library, they will just be removed. And when you do so afterwards, you don't have this temporary version anymore in your private mode library. This is one approach. The other one is when the other work team member is pushing changes into the repository, then he usually commits this to the repository. This means when you would pull the changes from the repository, then they would also find its way into your local workspace, of course, but you need to pull them. So there is a need to regularly pull the changes in this case, where best practice is anyway every morning pull the changes that you have. When you pull the changes, then they are transferred to your local workspace. And in this case, even if your private mode library would be different, you would immediately get a decorator into your local workspace, and it would ensure, for example, with the automatic build, that they are transferred to your private mode library. And then you are not running with a different version, even if you have a duplicate, so to speak, in your private mode libraries. But the two triggers here is either to consolidate your private mode library after you have committed your changes, or to regularly pull changes from the repository to ensure that your version of the private mode library is in sync. But in fact, if you don't do both of it, and there's a change, it could be that you are running temporarily still with your private mode library. But this is by intention, because you could have also just changed this module. This is your isolated runtime. and what you run is what you get, and what is in the private mode library. So therefore, I would say this works as designed, but you need to keep this in consideration. So I hope my explanations are clear. If not, yeah, just ask once again, please.
As you mentioned about the steps, that in private mode library, it's different than the server mode. It's 1 step and 10 step. We will look into that, Chezi. I have two programs with different names. Is there a way to compare them? I think you can just right click on both of them and do compare, right, Zvonimir? Even if the names are not identical.
Yeah, I think I have shown this the last time. In part 1, you can actually just select any modules and compare them with each other, any file, and it will just show you in the same comparison as I did with the base library compare here in my mixed mode example. You can, yeah, this is just the strength of Eclipse, that you can compare everything. So this should work.
Yeah. Okay, so we already are over time, but we will just finish the last question. Are there any plans to provide Visual Studio Code extended for now? For one, I will say that it's not for one, it's for Natural. And yes, we are planning to think of a Visual Studio Code extension. This is currently on progress. We have from Asif that they can reproduce the freeze by opening a module and making modification plus save. We will look into that. Maybe it will help us with trying to figure out the issue.
Yeah, just to mention to this, if you can reproduce it, please send us the example. This would be very valuable so that we can, as soon as possible, fix this instability.
Yeah. Okay, so there are some comments about increasing the parameters. Yeah. So that's it. That was the last one, and I think we are good for today. So thank you very much, Zvonimir and your Regina and Nicole for this presentation. Thank you all for joining. As mentioned, the recording will be available for you. As well, server will go out for you after that, and also hearing from you maybe additional ideas for future sessions and webinars like that. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a nice evening, day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.